Namaste YouTube. This is a video about the progression from being a PhD student, a PhD graduate, to becoming a yogi. I know this is relevant to many people. Being in academia, I knew many people that were interested in various things, passionate even about other things. And many of them were yoga. Their passions were yoga. And I know many people that have even dropped out of school to pursue yoga or what have you. Yoga has a way of kind of, as Richard Freeman says, ruining your life. And the life he's talking about is the life that you thought you wanted or that you were kind of conditioned to want. And so I'll just kind of give some key elements. Obviously, it was like a 7-year journey or a 5-year journey. I basically started my yoga right after I finished my master's degree, and I took a semester off. I was trying to do music, and I had all kinds of like negative habits and destructive tendencies and things like that, even bad relationships. And but I had tasted of yoga while I was wrestling at University of Oklahoma. I didn't like it, but there were a couple things I liked. 90% I didn't like. Then after my bachelor's, my sister took me to yoga, and again, a couple things I liked, many things I didn't like. One thing I really liked was the girl teacher, but I was very unsociable at the time. I had only hung around with guys like all my life, just as a wrestler, a Boy Scout, everything, all the sports I played, engineering as a discipline. So, but years later, when I took myself, after my master's, and I took myself to my first yoga class like that, of my own volition, it happened to be that girl. And we happened to have a connection, and so we happened to start dating. And so she taught me some yoga over that summer, and then we separated. I was accepted to University of Florida for the PhD program. At that time, I'd only practiced yoga about maybe 10 or 12 classes, and then maybe a little bit of home practice. But by home practice, I mean like play with this pose. Like it wasn't a sequence or any premeditated thing. So minimal experience, but they handed me the pieces of paper that had the sequences on it. And I had an idea of how to breathe because of the class. There was a good studio I went to, and as far as their hatha-yoga technique. And so I knew how to breathe with the poses, very much so. It was an Ashtanga system that I had learned, and so they did a lot of lead classes. If you know anything about lead classes, you have, it's unlike other kinds of lead classes because your breath pattern is controlled. It's lead. The breathing is lead also. So everybody inhales together, everybody exhales together, and the breathing is counted. So it's obvious if you're off the count. So when you have a wave of people, 20 people all inhaling at the same time in a quiet room, very audibly, it's almost like a rave or a concert or something. Like you can't help but get swept up in that. And so I learned the breath very early. I go to Florida, pursue the PhD. I'm practicing at home, which is an interesting, looking back now with what I know of yoga philosophy, that's a clue that I was born with an innate disposition towards yoga. Few people can do this, of practicing at home alone with no music very early in the morning every day, right when they start doing yoga. And I did that for a couple of years. I'm obviously skipping many details. I met teachers and things, but practiced at home for many years. Occasionally would go to a class. And I was working on my PhD very diligently. I started to publish a couple papers. I went to Italy to study, and I met a group of yoga people there in Italy that could recognize my ability, but was kind of astounded that I didn't really have a teacher and I didn't really go to classes ever. And obviously I was making mistakes in the things that I was doing, so they could tell that I was more or less self-taught, not really self-taught, but I didn't have a regular interaction with a mentor on the yoga skill. And so they boosted that. When I came back, they just started asking me to show them stuff. Not officially like, hey, I'll pay you, but it was a level of inquiry that was unfamiliar to me at the time. And also working in an office on a computer all day, I was a research scientist for environmental engineering. And if you want to know more about that, comment about what that is. Because it's weird if you have to explain what is your profession, then there's something about that, but I won't get into that. So people at the office would start mirroring me. They would start doing yoga poses or asking me about, because I would do like headstands and shoulder stands to invert, let the blood go back to my brain so I could sit and focus on my computer more. And so some people at the office started to get into yoga, and I started to see my influence. They might come to my, so then I started to teach classes, then I went and got certified. And at the time, I still was undecided. Like, I have a PhD, I'm finishing a PhD. There was no doubt in my mind, I got to finish this PhD because I had not completed wrestling. In college or in university, I had 1 year of eligibility left, and I quit for various reasons. And same with, I was a Boy Scout, and I quit that for wrestling, actually. And so I quit wrestling basically for like the music and the drugs. I quit the Boy Scouts for the wrestling, and I quit the music and the drugs. I mean, I still play a guitar a little bit, but what I was doing, I quit that for yoga, you know? And maybe one day I'll even quit yoga for something, but it could be something like a guitar where I love the guitar. I still play the guitar. I listen to guitar music. Like, I don't see myself ever not doing yoga, which is why I began teaching. Then I would travel for business. And because the teacher that certified me, he's a wandering yogi, just travels the world, has been doing that for about 45 years teaching, I modeled a lot of my business off of his business model. And since I was already traveling for school work, I mean, it is school, but I'm getting paid to be in school, so it's kind of work. I would just teach places I would go. Like, I'd call ahead and find a gig, sometimes not. And it became appealing to travel and teach because the money was better, and people pay attention more when you're a traveler. And my knowledge is not low level. I very rapidly began to see and understand that the things that I taught, the cues, the way I talked about it, my experience, and it largely was because of those first 2 years of practicing alone, silently, early in the morning, at home. And memorizing the sequence. So I recommend anybody that wants to teach, you've got to have a home practice. It's got to be silent. Don't listen to music when you do practice. That's a crutch. You don't need that. 1 out of 10 times, maybe, try it. You know, I'm not saying I never do it, but it's like 1 out of 10 maybe. And usually that's the handstand practice, the yoga practice, no. You know what I mean, the conventional yoga practice. So I began teaching more as I traveled, and I was faced with a decision. Am I going to be my professor's successor? Because he asked me to be a successor, and he was about to retire, he's an old guy. And I love Dr. Mark T. Brown and Howard Odom, his teacher, who opened my eyes to environmental science. It explained it in a way that it was like, yes, I get this. Dot connects to dot, 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 dot. And it was unlike most science. Most science is manipulating you. Most of the things that most of you quote as science, while there's elements of science, and there's probably even it's mostly science, it's probably even peer-reviewed, or they even have controlled samples. There's still flaws in the experiment, and there's still wordplay that is getting you to believe the argument they want you to believe. And it's the case for everybody. I'm not saying Howard Odom is not doing that. But the more dots that can be connected for you, like, you should be able to explain it to a 10-year-old. And if the 10-year-old can't get it, then you don't get it fully. You're just convinced of something that you wanted to believe. Anyway, that's an aside. So I was faced with that decision because I had these realizations about this is the nature of science. Science in academia and just academics in general are prostitutes of knowledge. They sell themselves to the government, mostly. It's mostly government funding. College, university, it's socialist. And so they tell the government, this is how it goes. You write a proposal, you say what you want to prove, and if they think it's worthy, they give you the money for it. The money, let's not talk about where the money comes from. And so, but to get that, it's very competitive. To get that, you got to tell them you're going to give them what they want to hear. And what does the government want to hear? You know, again, that's a topic outside of this. If you want to know my opinions on this and what I know about this, what I think I know about this, then comment below and I'll tell you what I think. But you probably have your own opinions. You don't need my opinions. So I was faced with the decision of going into that or try to make it as a yogi. I was already doing something with yoga, but it's not like a career, it wasn't. And it took mentors that believed in me, and what they told me is those letters, PhD, mean something. In this world, that means something. And you're very close, and if you want my professional opinion, then I would finish the PhD and then be a yogi. It's an interesting philosophy because a lot of people would say, well, be an engineer, and then once you pay off all your school loans and you have a family and you're established, then be a yogi. This is a similar kind of advice, finish what you're doing and then become a yogi, but it had a different reasoning. The value of the PhD was different than the value of all these other things. The value of having my loans paid off is that I don't have to worry about it. Well, what if I'm okay worrying about it? What if the worry is actually not a big deal to me? What if I've trained myself through fasting, through wrestling, through my yoga practice, that stress and worry actually isn't a big deal to me? That as soon as I get rid of that stress and worry, I'm going to get another stress and worry. And so just do business and take care of it as you can. I decided to go the yoga route. So I finished my PhD and immediately went to India as my gift to myself. And I came back and I started calling people, and now I teach around the country. Mostly the southern states, but that's expanding. And so that's my story, more or less. Obviously, there's lots of things that, for example, there was a moment right when I came back from Italy, before I started to teach people, that I had a very kind of mystical, I call it mystical, I don't know how else to describe it. It was an experience of my own psychology. I recalled something that happened, if you want to believe this, that happened before I was born to a family member. And I confirmed what I saw with that family member. And that really screwed with my mind a little bit. I couldn't figure out why or how is it possible that I could see a memory that happened before I was born, and then it was accurate. So there's some explanations for that, and if you're interested in that, then comment and maybe I'll make a video about that. But that was a big turning point. There are many events like that have happened in my yoga practice. I'd love to talk more about that. If anything I'm talking about you want to hear more about, comment, because I'm interested in giving you what you want. I'm not here to talk, so I hear my own voice. That's enough. I talk enough. And that was I remember a very big shift where I determined, like, I have to do this. I have to teach, like, this. And I'm sure many people have those kinds of experiences, and they all mean something to the individual. So your experience means something to you. Your experience is senior to you, and it's senior than all other experiences to you. And so believe in that. What you experience is real, and it's important, and it's you, and it's unique, and it's only you. So if you don't experience it, no one will, because it's just you. So I hope you found this helpful. Subscribe to the channel. Silent Flute program is thriving as always. Go to ninthlimb.com if you want to check out what that is. It's a lot of the best knowledge that I have on this subject of communication and yoga. So I hope to see you there, and otherwise I'll catch you in the next video. Namaste.